I'd like to call the 2020 Bellows Falls Village Annual Meeting to order. Good evening. As many of you may know, my name is Paul Bohosky, and I'm your moderator for this evening. 2020 has been a unique year with the Corona-19 virus, staying at home, wearing masks, social distancing. We're set up tonight for tonight's meeting, trying to keep social distancing in mind and according to the rules as established by the state of Vermont and Governor Scott. Tonight's meeting is also unique in that only 2 of the 7 articles will need action tonight, and 5 of the 7 articles will be voted upon by Australian ballot tomorrow at the Bellows Falls Fire Department from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Please stand if you are able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Until about 2 years ago, it had been more than 20 years since I had moderated a public meeting, and I would ask your indulgence and patience as we work our way through tonight's meeting. I have no doubt that you will kindly and gently call any errors to my attention. You should note that I will not recognize or call upon anybody standing behind the rail or head of the aisle, nor will we count your vote when the time comes. Right now would be a great time if everybody would shut off their cell phone and their pager, please. The meeting will be conducted under Robert's Rules of Order, except as modified by state statute. You cannot change state law, but you can choose to modify Robert's rules with a 2/3 majority vote. General Roberts had pages of rules for decorum during debate. I hope that it will not be necessary to remind you to conduct yourself in a civil and polite manner. As Mike Hardy, our long-serving village moderator, always said, we arrived as neighbors and friends, and we will leave as such. Please stand, if possible, and state your name when recognized. You'll have to forgive me if I do not call on everyone by name, especially with your mask on. It makes it a little bit more difficult to recognize who you are. We have a microphone set up directly in front of me. So what we would request is that you would please walk to the microphone. If there is more than one person who would like to speak, make sure we socially distance and stay 6 feet behind the person speaking, and wait to be called upon, and then speak into the microphone to ask your question or make your comment. Please address all comments and questions to the moderator, and I will either answer or redirect them to someone who can respond. Only registered voters may speak unless by leave of the assembly, which requires a 2/3 vote if there is an objection. Unless there is no objection, I will assume there is a leave of the assembly for village officials who may not be residents and voters to address the assembly for the purpose of explanation during this meeting. Those of you who are eligible to vote were given a voting card. And again, because we only have 2 articles that we'll be voting by, the purpose of the card is so that we can identify you as a voter, that you've gone through the checklist and we can identify you as a voter. So on Article 2 and Article 7, when it comes time to vote, if you just hold your card when we get to the point where we're going to accept or deny the motion. Those articles requiring an Australian ballot vote tomorrow will be taken up for discussion only this evening. No other action other than discussion can be taken on them at this meeting. I will strive to make any rulings that I'm called upon to make in an impartial and correctly as I can. Any ruling of the moderator can be challenged immediately after the ruling. I will explain my ruling, and if you are not satisfied, all it takes is a request to challenge the ruling and to put to a vote of the assembly. Debate on the motion to appeal the ruling of the chair is generally in order. It is my job to assist you in accomplishing the business of this meeting. Please raise your hand and ask questions if you do have questions of what is actually happening at this point or any point during the meeting. If you think that something happening is wrong or you don't understand what's going on, again, just raise your hand. We'll respond to you and try to make sure everyone understands where we are in the meeting. You must be recognized by the moderator to address the assembly. I will try to recognize all of those who wish to speak in an orderly fashion, getting around to all those who wish to speak but haven't had the opportunity yet, before returning to those who have already spoken. A person may only speak twice to an issue, and it is limited to 10 minutes total. I hope you can be brief and not feel you need to use up all your time or replow the ground that you or someone else has already gone over. A motion must be made, seconded, and restated by the moderator before debate on the motion begins. In most instances, only 2 amendments will be allowed on the floor at any one time. This is 1 amendment to the main motion and 1 amendment to the amendment where appropriate. It requires a motion, a second and 2/3 vote to cut off debate and call the question. You have to be recognized to make the motion. You can't just shout it out because you're tired of the debate. The motion to close debate is non-debatable. By state statute, once voters have acted on a question and taken up the next item of business, they cannot reconsider the action at the same meeting. Voting will be by voice vote unless the chair is in doubt, in which case there will be a division. Also, any voter may call for a division as long as we have not started the next item of business. Any voter may also move to vote by paper ballot during debate or before we have moved on to the next order of business, in which case the vote will be by ballot if the call for a ballot is sustained by at least 6 other members. Action under other business cannot require the expenditure of funds, nor can it be binding upon the village. Any action under other business is advisory only. So at this point, I'd kind of like to introduce the people up front. Again, I'm Paul Bohosky. I'm your moderator for tonight. Right here in front of me is Kathleen Niehawk, the village clerk. As we start right here, going across the table is Shannon Burbley, who is the financial director, Chuck Weiss, who is the acting village manager, trustee John Wright, trustee Stefan Golick, village president Deb Wright, trustee James McAuliffe, and trustee Gary Lickway. The warning for tonight and tomorrow has an introductory paragraph which reads as follows. The legal voters of the Bellows Falls Village Corporation are hereby notified and warned to meet at the Bellows Falls Opera House in the Rockingham Town Hall located at 7th Square in the Village on Monday, June 15th, 2020, at 7 p.m. to act upon all manners which may be voted upon by acclamation and not otherwise to be voted upon by Australian ballot, and then adjourn to the fire station at 170 Rockingham Street in said village at 8 a.m. on Tuesday, June 16th, 2020, to vote by Australian ballot on Article 1, Article 3, Article 4, Article 5, and Article 6. The polls will be open at 8 a.m. and will close at 7 p.m. Article 1. And Shannon just informed me that people on Zoom can talk. So we will get around if there are questions or comments. And so anybody that's Zooming in, we do have that opportunity for them. Article 1, to elect the village officers as required by law, and that will be voted tomorrow by Australian ballot. Article 2, to receive and act upon the reports of the village officers for the past year. Gary.
Mr. Moderator, I move to accept, to receive, and act upon the reports of the village officers for the past year.
Is there a second? The motion has been made and seconded that we will receive and act upon the reports of the village officers for the past year. Is there any comments, questions? Mr. McPhee, if you.
I've been told I'm better looking with a mask, but I'll take it off. The indebtedness of both the water and sewer departments, page 39 on the water, 43 on the sewer. I'm assuming that we are paying down part of the principal and all of the interest for that year. Is that correct? For instance, USDA loan number 1, this FY21 has a principal of 175,000 and an interest of 99.
Shannon, can you, or Deb? No, Shannon, okay.
Sure, could you just restate the question?
Yeah, I'm assuming that we are paying, like for fiscal year 21, the upcoming year, on the loan number 1, it's 175,000 rounded. We are paying on the loan and 99 rounded on the interest. We're paying the interest for that year plus part of the principal.
Correct, yes.
Okay, and approximate amount on those loans, I assume they're in the millions?
Yes, those loans are in the millions.
And the approximate period of time for pay down on, for instance, the wastewater in loan 1 and loan 2?
The original term of the loans were 30 years.
Okay. And we're not too long into them, are we?
We are not.
Okay. And I have a couple of more if I might proceed.
Absolutely,
Thank
since
you.
you're right there, Doug Moses.
Page 44, the elected auditors report, an explanation on the paragraph which reads, "We have noted that the independent auditor issued an unqualified opinion regarding the village financial statement." I got the audit report tonight, but just quickly went through it, but didn't quite understand what that means.
Shannon, again, if you.
There were no findings with the audit, so there was nothing substantive that needed to change from the way the books were done. And this is an unqualified opinion. That's how it's always stated from auditors.
Okay, so basically the auditor is probably saying they like you to do something different, but for some reason you don't want to. We don't have a problem with the audit.
No, we actually had no findings at all.
Okay.
We had nothing that they would have recommended us change.
Okay. kind of legalese then or something like that.
Exactly.
Correct, Doug.
Yeah, thank you. And just quickly, going to delinquent taxes, which the number is pretty good. I'm not saying the overall number is bad for taxes, but I'm concerned that there's several properties there that have no real value. I assume Stephen McAllister is the paper mill building down on the Westminster line, the old tannery, I don't know what you call it. At one point, Chemco, whatever it was called. Is that correct?
Yeah.
The one on Paper Mill Street. That really has no value. So I'm not sure we don't have to foreclose on property. We can avoid doing that, correct? If we so desire. I mean, I would not want to foreclose on that property and assume its current condition. I think that we would pay a heck of a lot more to foreclose on it and then what's owed on it.
I believe the value of the property, there is value in the property itself, and there has been some value in the building. There has been interest in the past several years. Remember the Justice Center
Yes.
proposal? Yeah. But we're moving on tax sale, at least the town is. I'm not sure how that will
Okay.
happen, if that'll be rolled in.
I just think that we need to also use some common sense. One of those Lindsay Van Squike, which the manager is very familiar with, that property to me is unlivable. If we foreclose because we owe its taxes, we have a liability. But thank you, that's my opinion. Getting to the one I consider that is a little out of whack is delinquent water and sewer. We have one person that owes us $7,588. That's page, 47 and 48. And we have one who owes us over 7, 1 over 4, 3 over 3. We have a couple of people who owe us quite a bit of money. Looking down the list, I see the worst place of Bellows Falls owes us $1,200. He hasn't been in business for years. So I'm just wondering if we can somehow stop these people who owe us, collect before they abandon their house, business, property, or whatever it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Any other questions or comments? Anything else? So we have a motion on the floor to receive and act upon the reports of the village officers for the past year. Motion has been made. It's been seconded. Are we ready for the question? All those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Opposed would say no. It appears the ayes have it. The ayes do have it, and the motion passes. Moving on to Article 3. To see if the voters of the Bellows Falls Village Corporation will vote to authorize its treasurer with the approval of the trustees to borrow money from time to time in anticipation of tax collection or payment of monies due the village from the state of Vermont or the federal government. Again, this is by Australian ballot, will be voted on tomorrow. Are there any questions or comments on that article? It's really a housekeeping article. It allows us to, if we need to borrow money prior to taxes coming in or money from the state or the feds. And again, that will be voted on tomorrow at the fire station.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, James.
Yeah, it is a housekeeping article, but it is a housekeeping article, but I do want to encourage people to vote yes on question number 3.
Any other questions or comments on Article 3? Seeing none, I will move on to Article 4. Shall the voters of the Bellows Falls Village Corporation raise and appropriate the money to pay the indebtedness of the village and to pay all other general and regular expenses of the village beginning July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2021 in the amount of $1,510,048 with the amount of $1,444,049 to be raised by taxes. Again, this is for discussion only. It's by Australian ballot tomorrow at the fire station. And I think I'm going to recognize Mr. McCullough for a summary and presentation of the budget.
I hope you all have your annual report, village annual report. If you would be so kind to turn to page 27. The village budget, as I think most of you know, is really quite simple. The first part, the first 3 pages here are what we call general government. And basically, it's the village share of the municipal manager and the assistant, and also the finance office. It also covers legal fees. It covers audit fees, office expenses, computer expenses, et cetera. It's really what you would call the overhead for the village. On page 29, you'll see that the budget for fiscal 21 is $207,000. Last year, the budget was $206,000. So essentially, it's been level funded. A few increases were offset by a few decreases. The main part of our budget, of course, is police and fire. On page 30, at the top of the page, you'll see the expenses for the police and fire building. We've carved that out separate so that people could see that. And again, you'll see things like maintenance, upkeep, oil, electricity, et cetera. Our budget this year is $56,000. The budget last year was $56,000. So again, there's no real change there. Next comes the fire department, which is on page 30, 31, and 32. As you know, we have a paid chief, and our fire staff are call firemen, such that when they are called, they are paid an hourly rate for participating in the activity or fire. Our budget this year is $263,000 on the top of page 32. Our budget last year was $271,000. It's actually down a little bit. Last year, you voted to approve the purchase of dress uniforms for our firemen. That was a $10,000 item. And of course, that was done this year. And so that's not in the next year's budget. So just a small increase in the fire department budget. The police department comes next. That's where the major reduction is found. If you look at the bottom of page 32, you'll see that last year's budget was $1.2 million. This year's budget is $977,000.
33, right?
Sure.
It's 33.
33, I'm sorry, yes. So it's about a $225,000 reduction. In last year's budget, we budgeted for a police chief, 9 full-time police officers, and a dispatcher. In this year's budget, we have budgeted a chief, 6 full-time police officers, and a dispatcher. Obviously, the trustees spent a lot of time on this. Our challenge, not only this year, but every year, is to basically provide a level of service that we feel our taxpayers and residents are looking for, and to do it at the most effective cost. I think we all felt that 6 full-time officers with the chief and the dispatcher would get the job done. This year, even though we budgeted for 9, we never had 9. I think at the highest we had 6. So, we've certainly managed to make it through. I think you also know that there's that in fiscal 2020, the trustees, along with our manager, identified the police department as having some issues. We worked very closely with the manager this past year, and a number of issues were tackled. That work has not been completed. We are without a full-time chief. We have Acting Chief Bemis standing in. We reinstituted a police chief search, which has begun this week, in fact. So I think our job, the trustees' job for next year, is to get kind of refocus on community policing in our village, keep the focus here and not outside of the village, get a new leader in place, and hopefully achieve what we all are looking for, which is excellent police service at a reasonable cost. Finally, we have a small amount budgeted for parks, which again always stays basically the same. So the sum total of our expense budget is $1,510,000. You heard the number that Paul read out in terms of what we're going to raise for taxes. And I believe if you approve this budget and Article 5, our tax rate will drop around 9.5 cents for fiscal 21.
Any questions or comments? If you'd like to go to the mic, please.
Tony James, village resident. How much are we going to save? 9 what? Cents on the tax rate, Jigs?
9.5 cents.
9.5 cents. So a $100,000 house in BF, what's that going to save a taxpayer?
$104.40.
So 104 bucks.
It's on page 9, yes.
So $104, and we're cutting the budget. How much?
About 225,000.
275. So you guys, I don't know, probably a month ago, month and a half, I can't keep track, cut the police dog. I think that was a mistake. The dog specializes in drugs. I believe the dog, maybe I'm wrong, this was paid for the year, and you guys cut the dog effective immediately. We have a huge drug problem in Bellows. I think it was a mistake to cut the dog. We had a guy, a felon, running around for, I believe it was 2 attempted murders. The dog tracked that guy from Hyde Hill up through my yard, up to Minard's Pond, and over to, I guess, Coda Heights, into one of the residents where there's a shootout, where the guy was grazed, nicked. I think the dog was a huge value then. There was another time, I don't believe it was Caesar. There was a dog we had brought in for a missing autistic kid, young adult up on Front Street that turned up missing at 2 or 3 in the morning. The dog tracked that kid down Front Street, down Atkinson Street to the house where that kid was in an abandoned house on the 2nd floor. I just wanted to tell every one of you, I think it was a huge mistake and just gross negligence to cut that dog effective immediately when it was paid for the year, and it should have been left up to the taxpayers. I also do, I think the PD budget's a little high. It may need some cut, and I just think right now is the wrong time. We have a huge, huge drug problem.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? If you'd like to go over to the mic, please, sir.
Good evening. My name is William Morse, village resident. I just want to reiterate what Mr. James has already stated. I live on a block that has drug and crime activity. Police visit it. I do not appreciate the absence of a dog that, with its senses, can pick up the trail of people, clothes, drugs, whatever. That is a big mistake. We need that asset in Bellows Falls. I don't want to live in a drug den. You don't either. This is part of the firewall between those of us who pay the bills and make a positive contribution in this village community and those that seek to take it away. This dog, this service, canine service, is part of the firewall that you've eroded through this action. I wish you would reconsider. I cannot support a budget without this service. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions?
Hi there, Gaetano Putignano. Wondered if someone could explain on page 30, wages janitor BFPD. That's for the police department cleaning only, correct?
That's correct.
We have 8 full-time employees in a square footage, I would guess 30% of the size of the fire department with 1 full-time employee. I'm wondering what led to that decision. I had attended some of your meetings and brought that question up. So the 8 full-time employees aren't required to clean, and the 1 employee on the other side is responsible to clean 3 floors. Is that correct?
So Jiggs, if you'd like to answer that, please. Or Debbie.
Well, Gaetano and I have had that discussion before, and we're fortunate that the fire department staff pitches in and does their cleaning. The police, certainly if they wanted to volunteer to do that, we'd be happy to have them do it. But that's not the case, and our responsibility is to provide custodial service to our building. So that is why we have it in the budget, Gaetano. The police do not do their own cleaning.
If I might add, the trustees did not advocate for that service. That was added 2 years ago. That was under the manager's discretion. Previously, we did not have a budget for cleaning at the public safety building.
I'm just wondering, we're looking to save money. It appears you guys did a lot of work here, and as the previous 2 citizens have talked about, it's a $4,200 line item for cleaning. I'm wondering if it came up with discussion with the police chief, with the employees of the village, that they could save $4,200, the taxpayers here, if they cleaned up after themselves.
Well, we could have that discussion.
You never had that discussion?
No, we can have that discussion.
Okay. So, but it never happened, right?
It did not during this budget cycle.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Colin.
So I agree with Tony and the gentleman before, after Tony, that spoke about the canine. Just a couple of questions to the trustees. So the Actual is $3,412, and then budgeted is $5,000 for the canine. Am I reading that correctly? Or
What page are you on?
I'm on page 32.
Thank you.
Is that the correct number? And then the other question I had too was, what is the overall cost for having Caesar and then taking that away? I mean, what are really the significant savings?
Jim, you got
That line
Was I
item-
right with those numbers, Jigs?
That line item is the overtime
Okay.
that the officer that's responsible for the dog
Okay,
incurred.
what was the total amount to have him in the budget?
Well, the cost of the dog itself, in other words, food, vets, and stuff like that, was not in the budget,
Right.
okay? What the canine costs the village is a dedicated police officer and a dedicated vehicle. We calculate based on a fully loaded police officer and a 4-year life cycle for a vehicle, that you are at very close to $100,000 a year for the village residents to have a canine. We have averaged over the last 5 years approximately 14 incidents in the village out of thousands of police reported incidents. Approximately 14 to 15 have been drug related. That's not drug arrests, it could be a drug arrest, but it's not all drug arrests. It's not all drug confiscations.
And that's with Caesar? Because I find that number hard to believe.
Well, if you look at the,
I mean,
if you look at the itemized reports, Colin, and you're welcome to look at his public knowledge, that's what we've reviewed over the last 5 years. We reviewed this year. So for 14 to 15 incidents in the village, drug-related,
In a year?
we thought, did you have another question or?
No, I'm wanting you to answer that within.
Well, I'm trying to answer it. I'm saying that for 14 to 15 incidents a year, to ask our taxpayers to pay $100,000 to have a canine, we thought was extraordinary. Particularly when the Westminster Barracks of the State Police has a canine available, and all of the towns around us rely on the state police for that service. But clearly, one of our issues with the police department is the proliferation of drug activity in this village. We don't think we're getting good value in terms of not making more inroads into that drug problem. And you can be sure that that's going to be a key priority for our next police chief. And anyway, so those are the numbers, Colin. That's the cost. And as I said, we did not feel that that was a good investment for our 3,000 residents to have to bear.
All right, well, me personally, I think it's a huge mistake, but thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Hi, Julie Torres. I would have to agree with what everyone has said so far about Caesar. My question, Mr. McAuliffe, is, so is Officer Checky not working at the Bellows Falls Police Department anymore?
Oh, sir, yes, he is.
So we still have to pay that officer?
Well, he's one of our staff.
Okay, and we still have.
He just doesn't have canine duties.
Right, but he still drives around the canine unit.
Well, it's the same vehicle. There's no.
That's my point. I'm kind of confused. You said there's $100,000 put into this animal and this dog being used within our village, but we have the officer, which I value. I think that's important. We have the dog, we have the vehicle. If the dog is no cost to us, isn't it true that we still have the officer and we still have the vehicle? I'm just confused. If you could explain that to me.
I think we did. The officer is assigned to other duties. And obviously, we're not going to need a K-9 unit in the future. So we're going to be getting rid of, in fact, we moved the other night to sell the vehicle. So we will not have another vehicle.
So Officer Checky will just be,
Officer Checky will be one of our 6 police
Full-time
officers that
officers.
are doing the work of the protecting our village.
does he take a pay cut when he doesn't have Caesar?
I'm sorry?
Would he have a pay cut for not having Caesar with him?
No, his pay rate is not based on K-9 at all. It's based on the union contract.
I just know nothing about this. That's why I'm asking. I'd rather be informed and know where, I just don't understand how it can go from 100,000 and then all of a sudden you just eliminate the dog and all of a sudden you take that position and you still have the police officer working, which is wonderful, but all of a sudden it's a perfect world and everything's good. But, and I agree with Colin. I mean, I'm not saying you're not correct on the numbers, but I feel like we're a corridor for drugs and transactions throughout 91. And I think it is a mistake. And I think if it were your family member, like my brother said, who was lost or gone somewhere and you needed to find them, I think you'd probably second guess wanting a dog local quickly rather than at a state police barrack where God knows when they'd show up. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Paul, if I may.
Yes,
I just want to make it clear, the dog was not removed, the K-9 program was removed, which we, as village trustees, accepted at the beginning of the program in FY20, well, in 2015, and eliminated the program in March of 2020. Not the dog, the program. The car is being sold. It is the oldest one in the fleet. It is on its last legs, according to Interim Chief Bemis. The insignias are still on there. The vehicle is being utilized as a regular police vehicle, and it will be sold very soon, along with another vehicle, which we found should have been sold several years ago, wound up in the pit, and is also getting sold as well. The program was eliminated, and I, as a daughter of an officer who was a police officer for 30 years of his life, know that police officers have other tools in their belt to beat drugs and to catch drug addicts and drug dealers other than a dog. Other communities do not have dogs. They rely upon a dog when it can be called, but there are other things in their tool belt as police to catch drug crime. And that is what we expect to be done by our officers in the village of Bellows Falls.
Thank you, Deb. Any other questions or comments? Anybody on Zoom? Do you have any questions coming from Zoom? Anything, Shannon?
It's come through.
Okay.
You haven't had anything from Charlie or anything? No?
Nothing, okay. Any other questions on Article 4? If not, I'm going to move on to Article 5. Shall the voters of the Bellows Falls Village Corporation raise and appropriate the sum of $20,000 to fund repairs and improvements at the fire and police station to include repairs of the Lula elevator or of the front doors and beams, or both. This amount to be raised by taxes. Again, will be a discussion only. This is voted on by Australian ballot tomorrow at the fire station. Any questions or comments on Article number 5?
I got a little bit of information, Paul, if you will.
Okay, Deb.
A note from Chief McGinnis, and then I'll pass it off to him with additional information for the public. The projects that have been completed in the 2019 to 2020 budget at the fire and police facility include a new boiler, oil tanks, chimney and removal of all the oil tanks, and old chimney, and an upgraded emergency generator. Moving forward into FY 2020, we would like to repair the existing elevator and/or begin work on the front of the building to include new doors, sandblasting the steel beams, and repainting them. Additionally, moving forward, the projects will focus more on maintenance, and we will start to look at the best way to optimize the building's layout for future use. Chief Bemis, do you have anything else? I'm sorry? I'm sorry, what did I say that? My apologies. Yes, Chief McGinnis.
Any other questions, comments? Any other questions on comments? Article 5. If not, I'll move on to Article 6. Article 6 reads, shall the Bellows Falls Village Corporation adopt its annual budget by Australian ballot? Again, this will be voted tomorrow at the fire station by Australian ballot. Are there any questions or comments on that article? Any questions or comments? If not, I'll move on to article number.
Before we move, I think I'd like to just.
Absolutely, John.
So everyone understands here what we're talking about, right? This is.
Yeah, so everybody can.
Everyone's here understands what we're talking about. This is moving the annual budget vote to Australian ballot on the day of, not just once, but moving forward.
From now on.
From now on. So this year we're doing it out of procedural glitch, addendum as provided by the legislature. So we're going to be trying it this year to see how it goes. But this has been a debated topic before in the past. And I just find it unusual that a topic like this has absolutely no debate or discussion at this point, because this will be what we're going to be doing in the future moving forward.
Again, I will ask any questions or comments.
Thanks.
Mr. McPhee.
Let's circulate, and thank you. I just feel that there's a fair amount of voters here tonight considering the virus, but it's our usual amount of voters. A small percentage of the village of Bellows Falls, due to various reasons. We have an older population. I think that we will find out tomorrow, this year especially, there are a number of candidates, that a lot higher percentage of the voters will have a right to approve or disapprove the budget. The problem being, of course, if it's disapproved, it can't be amended that day and proceed forward. But I believe in a democracy that we need to get the highest amount of people possible, and I think that will occur at the polls. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Clark.
You recognize
While I do appreciate the fact there may be more voters, I want to point out that we will be giving up the right to make this our budget. In the future, with Australian budget, we can only approve or disapprove what the trustees have presented. If we do it from the floor, we can make it our own. We can increase, we can decrease, and we will not have that option in the future. So I, for one, am opposed to the Australian ballot. I would rather see us, even if it costs us some money, somehow arrange more transportation for people to be able to come to the meeting, or perhaps be able to do it through Zoom. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Or just, sorry, sir.
Dwayne Case, Village resident. I'm glad I showed up tonight. I did know that the budget was on Australian ballot for this year, but I did not realize that it was set to go forward. Why is that? Why, in other words, why is it not just an exceptional experience for this present year, given our health situation? Why is it being made something that will be permanent?
This was a recommended suggestion for us to put the budget on the ballot, Australian ballot. And because of that, and because for a few years, maybe more than that, off and on, it has been requested from other people that it does go to Australian ballot. And this is an opportunity to test that theory, that we could do that. I do believe, however, if we are to go into future years with an Australian ballot, that we will need to look at our charter and alter the time frame by which we actually have an annual meeting and then Australian ballot, which would give us the opportunity to move the budget up or down on the floor and then have it printed and then have more residents vote it up or down at that point, which would still make it our budget that way. You would have input as legislators on a single day at an annual meeting, and then we would print the ballot, distribute it, and then do our voting. I think that's the way we would do it in the future. This is a skip year and a test year for us to see if people really indeed do want an Australian ballot for our budget.
Your comrade just specified that this was going to be the way going forward, and now you're saying something different.
No, only if it's voted for. If voters say yes, more voters say yes to Australian ballot every year instead of no, then that will be the way we go forward. It's up to the voters to make that decision tomorrow. On Article 6.
I don't understand. Could you read Article 6, please?
Article 6 reads, shall the Bellows Falls Village Corporation adopt its annual budget by Australian ballot? And that is future budgets by Australian ballot.
Okay, so there's the previous article that actually
Article 4 is
delimits
because
the money
of the
that will be paid.
coronavirus and the ability to go to Australian ballot on a number of issues. That's why the trustees decided to go that route. This is for Article 6 covers next year's budget and all future budgets.
Thank you. I thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
I would like to, express my preference that there be time in the annual village meeting for that discussion to take place. At a previous place of residence, we had a system similar to what I think Ms. Wright is describing, where the budget first had to be presented at town meeting, village meeting, and then upon the approval or alteration of that budget, the altered budget then went to Australian ballot for final approval. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Denny?
Dennis Hardy, village resident. I spoke before on having the budget voted on at this meeting, or at the town meeting, or whatever meeting, by the voters that come here. The problem is that you can say what you want, but the voters are not attuned to what the budget actually is if they don't come to this meeting and hear the discussion. And we can vote up or down. We can add to the budget. We could add the dog back tonight if we voted on the budget here.
Could have added the money.
We could add, correct, that's correct, we could have added the money. As at the town meeting, the voters added in money, which the selectmen decided not to, I understand they decided not to spend it, but it's at their own peril that they did that, you understand? So I think the voters should come in and discuss the budget here and vote on it tonight. If it gets turned down tomorrow, we have to have another special meeting, which is gonna cost us at least $3,000. And we'll have another meeting and we'll vote it on the floor there. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, discussion? Any comments or questions out of the Zoom group?
Might I?
That's Chairman.
Yeah.
Be recognized, Charlie, go ahead and speak if you would, and ask your question.
Yeah, I would just love to hear the trustees' feelings. They're the people in the trench right now, and just go down the line whether they think it's a good idea or not.
So the request is for the trustees to voice their opinion, whether it's a good idea or not to have the annual budget voted by Australian ballot in the future. And that's really up to each trustee, whether they would like to answer that question or not.
Is that was his question? It was about the budget, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
So John, answer.
So personally, my feelings, I would prefer to do it in a meeting amongst my community members. I feel that Vermont has a tradition in town and village meetings. I feel very proud to be able to be part of that. And whether I'm sitting here or whether I'm sitting on the other side, I feel proud to participate. And I think that one of the most important aspects of our government is the ability for discussion and communication amongst residents and the boards. And I think that's an important aspect of our municipal government. But that's my personal opinion. I also think it's worth the discussion amongst everyone here and amongst everyone at home, which is why I was surprised that no one was initially going to say anything, because I know that this has been discussed for a while and that there are opinions on both sides. And I think part of our job on this board is to facilitate the discussion, and I hope that we had that tonight. Thank you.
Stefan, if you'd like to respond or not.
Yep, I'm going to reiterate what Denny said and both Jonathan said. I think communication is key. This is Vermont government. It's yours and our opportunity to discuss it and debate it, to add or to take away. So, I mean, if it gets voted down, yes, there's a cost incurred. And the question is, what's the board do next to have to reduce it? Where? But I think it's important. That's town meeting, village meeting tradition, and I agree that it should be at a public meeting on the night before the voting, the annual voting.
Deborah.
I want people to understand that when we actually postponed the vote on the budget, we didn't even know if we were going to have the opportunity to have a meeting like this. Initially, remember, it was nobody, and then 10, and then 25. And then we found out from the Secretary of State that based upon the number of people allowed in this room, we could do 25% of them, which is 100 people. And yet there were still less than 50 here. My concern has always been the same. I want public discussion. I want people to have input over the budget, up or down, that sort of thing. But at the same time, I would like, of 3,200 people, to have at least 10% of the people making that decision for the taxes that they're going to bear. That is why we strive so hard to reduce a budget on an annual basis and make sure that we are getting the best bang for our buck and we are using our money efficiently, because we're taxpayers here too, and we know you have to bear this burden. That's part of the problem. More people need to come to meetings, to annual meetings, and participate. The only time we ever get a huge number of people was when they're angry about something, and they all show up. And we had over 200 people in this room about 1 year when they were really angry about a budget. And that brought them here. That should not be what we do as Vermonters. We should have the ability to be happy and vote a budget in. And I do understand that right now, people are afraid. And I'm very proud of all of you who have managed to come in here despite the need for social distancing to have something to say. But we didn't even know initially when we set the budget that we were going to be able to do this. So I thank you for it. But at the same time, we did what was prudent and safe for our community. Yes, if the budget is voted down, we will have to do this again. And this time, I don't know, as long as the virus stays away, we will have that discussion and you will choose your budget here. But we don't know. And that's what we're going on, is what we can know and what the governor believes is safe for us. And that is what we were doing. Thank you.
Mr. McAuliffe, if you'd like to speak to it.
I'm one that likes to have more people vote than fewer people vote. And I would be happy to go through the inconvenience of a budget being voted down. Let's face it, the main reason to vote down budgets is when they go up. So I think in this particular year, it's a safe one to have on the ballot. I understand the arguments for this body to be able to do things like that, but I think that a lot of good people don't come to this meeting for a lot of reasons, but I do think that they have a right to vote, and as I said, I would like to have it in a format where more people vote. So I like the idea of the Australian ballot.
Gary?
I'd have to agree with Jonathan. I believe it's up to you guys. I believe the conversations we work for you guys. And to have an Australian ballot, to me, is not right. So I would oppose the Australian ballot, and let's talk it out and see what we can do.
Any other questions or comments from the public? If not, then I would move on to Article number 7, to transact any other business deemed proper when not involving the expenditure of village funds or any other business acted upon in the preceding articles. And who am I recognizing to make that motion? Mr. Golick.
Mr. Moderator, I move Article 7 to transact any other business deemed proper when not involving the expenditure of village funds or any other business acted upon in the preceding articles.
Is there a second? Motion's been made and seconded that we, at this point, transact any other business deemed proper when not involving the expenditure of village funds or any other business acted upon in the preceding articles. Article number 7, is there anyone that has anything they'd like to bring up before this body?
That open to pretty much anything?
Yes.
Bruce Bennett, village resident. First thing I'd like to say is that the work going on the highway department is impressive. There's a lot being done, and I appreciate it because it involves the hill that I transport up and down daily. And I know there is a lot of work that is slated because Everett put a lot of effort in the last 2 months being in his job. I witnessed it, and I want to recognize all the work that he had done and indirectly continues to do for the town. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, great. Anything else? Any other business?
Moderator, I move we adjourn. Second.
We have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Don't forget, voting tomorrow morning at the Village Fire Station from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. And thank you very much, everyone.